All right, all. Welcome to the first session of our afternoon here in the Manufacturing Materials tract of Startup Week by Launch Dayton. This afternoon, in this first hour, we have the privilege of two distinguished guests who are going to steer us through some intellectual property and banking considerations for our small businesses. We're going to start with an open session with Ben Kern, and he is going to cover intellectual property for us. We're going to open the Q&A during that session. You can just type the questions that you have in your box there in Socio, and they'll get transferred over onto WebEx here for us, and we'll be able to answer those. We'll stop at about 25 minutes into the presentation, make sure there's no Q&A, and then we'll move over to Mary. So we'll be starting here with Ben Kern. Ben is the managing partner and co-founder of Kern Kendrick LLC. He's a registered patent attorney with global patent and technology practice. Ben has 17 years of experience drafting and prosecuting patent applications. Ben counsels domestic and international clients with respect to monetization of patents and technology generally, including through license agreements, as well as negotiating the structure of joint ventures and joint development agreements. Ben regularly advises clients regarding patent infringement, validity, and enforcement issues. This frequently involves preparing freedom to operate, right to sue, and other advisory opinions. So, Ben, thank you so much. I'm going to start your presentation, and we'll let you run through it.
Thank you, Eric. It's the first time that I can remember, and maybe ever, that somebody has described hearing me talk as a privilege, or described me as distinguished. So this day. I guess it has nowhere to go but down. But as when we were talking before the presentation, I noted that one of the great things about the COVID mandated format is that expectations are low. So as long as I come in somewhere in that spectrum, this should work out pretty well.
It's always a privilege to spend time with you, Ben. So I think you should see your slide deck up. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and just let you run the show here.
Okay, and if you would flip to the second slide. So what I want to accomplish in this short time is to talk through some of the different types of intellectual property and how those are obtained, what use they have, to work through some myths, and then ultimately, as the undercard, to seed the platform to Mary. So on this first slide, you can see I set this up in a chart format. There are four different types of intellectual property. The first are the ones. The first is the one that we think of as perhaps first in the technology space, that being utility patents. Patents generally. The first being utility. These cover the inventions. They're kind of what you think of when you think of patents. We also have design patents. In the manufacturing space, I think these are underutilized because they often will cover an ornamental, they always cover an ornamental non-functional design. And you can see, whether that's a Coke bottle or the way that's particularly shaped, garments, that sort of thing. Copyrights, we're really talking about music, books, when we think of it generally. But websites, videos that show how a technology is taken into practice could and should be the subject of copyright. Trade secrets, the stuff that you have to, as the name implies, keep secret, and then finally trademark. They're absolute jewels if you can get them, and allow us many times to be first to market. Next slide, please. So, when we think of these different demarcated intellectual property types, we often think of them as separate, and they are. And you can see this ancient phone that's up on the screen. The reason that I continue to use it year after year after year after year is because just this little device that fits actually quite nicely within the text has so many different types of intellectual property. It provides an excellent example. For example, on the trademark side, you can see the Nokia symbol, the N95 symbol, Symbian, Java. You can see all these things, and they're evident as what we would call trademarks. Patents, that much is obvious. If there are patent infringement lawsuits right now, they are very likely, or they're most commonly between companies like Nokia and Apple and sort of big companies, because that's frankly who can afford to maintain such litigations. There are copyrights here, the software code, the instruction manual, even the ringtone. As I said, music is a subject matter for copyright. Trade secrets, we don't know because they're secret. And then finally, designs. And again, this is an underutilized aspect of intellectual property law for manufacturing entities, and you wouldn't really think of it. The form of the form of the overall phone, the arrangement of the buttons in an oval shape, the three-dimensional waveform of the buttons, and even the sliding screen. Next slide, please. So the types of United States patents, we're going to talk most about the first and second one. I'm not sure that that the third has a lot of utility in this with this audience, but it is one of the types. Utility, how an invention works, its functionality. You have 20 years from the original filing date. They're great if you can get them. They're expensive. They take a long time, generally speaking, but they have a value that can be, it can end up being the most, and often is the most valuable aspect of a company. The second type of patent, design, we've talked about how it looks, ornamental design, as described and shown in that patent application. You get 14 years from the grant date, so from the date that you actually have a granted patent. And then finally, plant varieties, but we won't spend much time on those. Next slide, please. And so here is the face page of a couple of, here are face pages from a couple of utility patents. You can see in the first instance a video gaming device, and in a second, it's a garment, which is a surprisingly ubiquitous subject matter for patent applications. But that's the type of thing that we would seek patent protection on. Processes, methods of making articles, whether those are chemical compositions or devices, the type of nouns you think of as holding in your hand. Those are the types of things that would be proper subject matter for utility patents. Next slide, please. Design patents, which I've mentioned many times. All of these devices, if you look, take as an example Crocs or this watch. There's probably not any utility patent protection that would be available now. There are aspects of Crocs that may have some utility, but the fact that it looks different can give enough novelty in a design patent to seek patent protection. And we'll talk about this more in the slides to come, but design patents are much, much less expensive, probably a tenth of the cost, and take a third of the time to get through. Now, the protection is concomitantly reduced, or I should say less expansive, but it depends a lot of times on what you're trying to accomplish with the patent. Next slide, please. So we won't spend any time other than to say this is what a plant patent might look like in the era of medical marijuana in Ohio. There may be manufacturing of different types of plants, and so that may plant protection may make a comeback, but for now we won't spend much time on that. Next slide, please. So trade secrets, these this is one of the decisions that an inventor or an inventive entity will need to make early in the life cycle of an invention. On the one hand, trade secret has the advantages of being indefinite, doesn't have an expiration date per se. It's not registered publicly or disclosed. In fact, then it's not a secret. It can be, but it has the downside that it can be separately discovered. And if somebody else comes up with the same idea or something close to it, there's no way to stop them unless, as you see in the last bullet, the trade secret was illegally appropriated. And they don't cost, trade secrets don't cost anything to maintain on their face. The process of keeping something secret is not free. And can be very challenging to do because employees leave companies, and employees don't often forget what they learned at the previous employer. Even if there's not any malintent, you can't unlearn things, generally speaking. On the patent side, there's some work. You are making a decision getting into the patent space, but you get a 20-year term, which amounts to a monopoly, and it's a bad word these days, but that is what it is. The exchange that you're making is that you're giving is that you get a 20-year monopoly on that invention in exchange for publicly disclosing the invention in a way well enough, and it's a strange way to say it, but that a person having ordinary skill in the art can make and use that invention. You have a right to exclude others, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. And there is a remedy for infringement, whether to make the infringer stop or to make the infringer pay you money. That's through a court system. Enforcing patents through a court system is a terrible business model. Sometimes it's necessary. There's a much better way, and that is usually typically there's a much better way, and that's a business solution for a license or a joint development agreement or that sort of thing. Finding peace in these circumstances almost always works out better for the parties than suing each other. Next slide, please. And as I talked about, trade secret protection can be very fleeting. If there's a disclosure, even if that disclosure is accidental, as long as it's not, well, I should say two things. One, if it's not illegal, but accidental, then the trade secret is, the gig is up, as they say. The other issue is that even if there's an illegal disclosure, those who would not have been party to the bad action now know. And what do you do with them? Reverse engineering, somebody else could think of it, and you don't have any protection on it. Again, that's independent development. And taking steps to keep something as a trade secret under Ohio law is not trivial. There are a number of steps that need to be taken, and you have to be careful and again limit who can come into contact, and if it's a part of your business on a day-to-day basis, it may prove impossible or impractical to do that. Next slide, please. So, as I said, I wanted to dispel some myths. And the first one is getting a patent means you may use the invention. I struggled with which one of those words to emphasize. The fact that you obtain an issued patent is wonderful, but it is, as I say in the second bullet point, it's a negative right. It's the right to exclude others. It's not a right to use the invention yourself. The patent invention may still run afoul of laws or regulations for whatever reason. There's not a requirement like there is in trademark law, where you can patent scandalous things, you can patent all sorts of things that would offend sensibilities and may be illegal, but that doesn't keep them from being patentable. It's not necessarily one of the inquiries. And the other aspect is that you may have thought of an improvement over a process, but the original process might also be covered by patent protection, so that you may be able to exclude others from using sort of your improvement, but it doesn't mean that you can practice that invention without obtaining permission from the original patent holder. Next slide, please. So the second myth, and all of these are soft myths, is that if you patent it, the investors will come. Now, I put the emphasis in the right place there. The value of a patent obviously arises from the revenue stream that it protects. That said, as I said in the beginning of the presentation, obtaining a patent, or even having a pending patent application, has value, as it has a chilling effect oftentimes on competitors. It can force another patent holder's hand to do business with you, where otherwise that other patent holder might, in terms of cross license. There are lots of business opportunities that may not be investor based that where there's value in having even a pending application, let alone an issued patent. But an issued patent oftentimes it's especially for a startup, right? Because you don't have revenue generally yet. It might be the only asset that you have is that promise. And investors are any sophisticated investor is going to ask, do you have, if I put money into this venture, so an investor might not come at all, but if they do, they're going to ask, if I put money into this venture, how do I know that somebody else just can't, hey, that's a great idea and do it? So they're going to ask about patent applications. They're also going to ask, there's no obligation when filing a patent application to do prior art searching, but when somebody sits down to check that due diligence box in any kind of a deal, they're going to ask the question, what is your, what is the intellectual property protection, and have you looked to see if anyone else has a patent on something similar, and will we be able to ultimately get a patent if you're only in the application stage? So while it won't necessarily create investors out of whole cloth, having a patent application and having a patent program in place may keep them. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite slides. It's a metaphor from my life. The third, filing a provisional patent application will protect you. And again, I think I put the emphasis in the right place that time. I've heard the term provisional patents. That's not a thing. We have provisional patent applications. These are not examined, published, issued. There's no right to exclude based on them. Yet they have the same legal requirements as a utility application. What it does, it's an option. In 12 months from the time you file a provisional patent application, you need to file a utility application, one of the types that we discussed early in this presentation. You'll hear the term, dirty provisional, or that's the typical term, or cover sheet provisional. Be wary when you hear those terms, because that 12 months of, and I'm using air quotes, but you may not be able to see me because you can see my screen. That 12 months of protection is only as good as, or that option is only as good as what you disclose at the beginning. Next slide, please. So we've talked a little bit about design patents and utility patents. They're less expensive. They're less expensive to repair, no maintenance fees. The applications themselves are not published, the patents are. And you get 14 years from the date of filing. These are, you can do a lot of them really quickly, and you can do them inexpensively, and the path is much clearer. Next slide, please. The fourth patent myth is that patents are expensive, and again, it's kind of a myth. They can be. But in the early stage, and for startups, I talked about this sort of buyer beware on this concept of dirty or cover sheet provisionals. There's a place for them. What we prefer to do is what I call a streamlined provisional. where we figure out what it is you're trying to sell, or the quickest path to revenue, and we file a patent application that very clearly describes that commercial embodiment. Think of it as a snapshot. That's the you can put a patent application on file that's very good and very useful for a much more reasonable sum than writing a full tome. You can do this many times over the course of that 12-month period. I'm talking about a provisional application over the 12-month period we discussed earlier. And then you can, at the end of that year, sweep back and sweep all of those into a utility application. I call that serial provisional patent filing, and it can have, and I have seen it personally. I've seen it happen on many occasions that is the best way to do it in this day and age. It gets applications on file quickly, less expensively, and in a much more focused way. And it at least mitigates the possibility of filing a patent application, wiping your hands of it and moving on, and forgetting that the amount of development, how much can change in the product between day one and day 365. Next slide, please. This is my second aside and my last substantive slide. Sometimes inventors and startups and in startup in the startup context, people are too concerned with sort of, I want to make sure that I have the final iteration of this. It needs to be perfect. That's not the case. We don't need to hit home runs. We need to get walks and singles. And if you can get a double every once in a while, then those types of things score runs. They attract investors. They give us all of the benefits that we've talked about. Patenting early and often in the provisional sense is the way to go. And those are often, very often, iterative changes to what already exists. It's not a new mousetrap. It's just a little better spring. And that's the way to think about them. Quick and focused, and not trying to do too much. That ought to be the mantra for intellectual property protection for startups. So I look and see if I can pick up any questions, but that is the end of my presentation, which is pretty close to time. Does anybody have any questions?
Let me check, Ben, and see if we have any questions in the box here. And it doesn't look like we do. Sometimes we have, and sometimes we haven't. Since we switched over to this WebEx, I don't know if we had the ability to transcribe those. Ashley or John, did you guys see any questions come up in Socio?
No questions yet.
Okay. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to switch over to Mary here, and I'm going to bring up your presentation. Just hold on a second. So for the second portion of the agenda today, we're having Mary Shancey from Bank of America give us a presentation on banking resources for small manufacturing businesses. Mary's a senior vice president with Bank of America and refers to herself as a strategic partner to help her clients and colleagues. Mary has 31 years of commercial banking experience. Prior to joining Bank of America in April 2017, Mary's banking roles included middle market and business banking relationship management, alternative and government guaranteed lending, large corporate banking, leasing, and various management positions as well. Mary has been active in the Dayton, Ohio business community since 2001, and before that in the Cleveland, Ohio, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania markets. She's an active board and committee member for several industry organizations, including Risk Management Association, the Dayton Regional Manufacturing Association, and Dayton Chamber of Commerce, and the Miami Valley Venture Association. So Mary, I'm going to bring up your presentation now. Let me know when you see it, and I will drop off and let you have it. And everything seems to be moving a little bit slower over WebEx, so when you ask me to advance, you might just have to wait 1 second to see it. And you should see that now. Let me know when you can see it, Mary.
I had to take myself off of mute. I can see it.
Wonderful. So we should have you up. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, and you're in charge now.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, hello, everyone. My name, again, is Mary Shancey, and I am a very experienced relationship manager, lender, strategic partner to businesses for a little over 30 years now. The content I'm going to present today is fairly basic, and I would appreciate any questions. My intention is to provide a banker's perspective of the information that you present to us. It's often a difficult task to find a bank when you're starting up a business. In fact, most banks won't lend money to you until you're at least 2 years into your experience. And hopefully those are 2 successful years, which is often not the case. However, I highly recommend establishing a bank relationship, even in your need for checking or other financial services as soon as you start. And by relationship, I don't mean just open a checking account. I mean, get to know the people at the bank. You might think that, well, the old paradigm is, the teller or this or that. Really now we're all mobile. We're all using our mobile capabilities. You're actually going to have to reach through there to find a relationship manager in the bank that deals with businesses, small businesses. And when you're opening that account, ask for that, because we're here to as a trusted advisor, and I would say there ought to be at least 3 trusted advisors that you have when you start your business. One would be your attorney, one would be your accountant, and a third would be your banker. And again, don't take offense when the answer is no when you walk in the door with a business plan and ask for a line of credit. It's very typical that startup businesses are financed by, no offense, but by, I always say, friends, family, and fools, or investors that are particularly keen on what it is that you do. However, we can certainly provide lots and lots of information that I find to be very important to businesses at the very beginning. As I go through these slides, I will also make some suggestions about what to include and not include, or what jumps off the page at us. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and flip to the next slide. Thanks. The first thing I'll talk about is the entrepreneurial mindset. And you are probably already very familiar with this because it describes you. If you could flip to the next slide. Now, okay, another one. Okay, I think back one. No, maybe forward 2. Okay. Okay, so let's stop at that one with the clouds. If you're starting a business, that you're not a person who really necessarily wants to be in a job with a boss. And that's probably driven you in some part to want to create an organization of your own. You can go ahead and flip the slide. We want you to always consider, and we can, as a banker, we can see your desire. It jumps through your skin as you're describing your opportunity to us, and I love that about entrepreneurs. It's very, it never gets old for me. But what we want to make sure you do before you start this endeavor is to contemplate your own needs, your financial health, your personal life, and your professional life. If you could flip the switch or flip the slide. One more. If you could change the slide again. Okay. The one so the column that I will focus on while we discuss this slide is the third one. This is the one that people simplify and under-prepare for. It's the personal aspect. But we really have to understand if you can live without the certainty of steady income. Are you committed to the long hours and intense focus? And are you reliant on a social network that you will no longer be able to access when you start this venture? I always try to ask these questions. They are para the dollars and cents piece of it, but they're often the reason for success or failure when we get down the road, because this is the real deal. This is, can you pay for childcare, et cetera. So we definitely want to spend some time understanding that you have prepared yourself and your family for this new venture. If you could flip the slide, please. One more. This is an interesting one because an entrepreneurial mindset, I have learned, is something that you're tasked with understanding your own mindset and the mindset of your employees. It can be very frustrating as you begin to hire people or as you realize you're not, you're more entrepreneurial than employee in terms of your mindset. Basically, employees want a paycheck and want the company to succeed, but certainly during set hours and without much personal risk. Whereas entrepreneurs, it's not an option to fail. There are emotional and financial risks that you take every day. I've lived side by side with entrepreneurs who, literally when you have to be ready to unlock that door in the morning and say, I got to make $50,000 today to meet payroll and be able to deal with that kind of pressure. And it comes through all of them at one point or another. Nobody sort of starts up the S curve without bumps in the road, in my experience. If you could please flip the slide. So when you are talking to not only bankers but investors, we want to know what your plan is. And I'm sure you've taken courses on writing a business plan. I'm only here to emphasize the most useful parts of that plan to the audience. The audience being the providers of funds. So that could be your family, your banks, your group of investors, certainly your accountant and your attorney want to understand how you plan to make it. If you could flip the slide. Here are the basic components that I see in most financial plans. And I would highly suggest in creating yours that you create it for yourself. You know that the audiences are looking for particular things, but this is a living document. And the companies that I have seen locally in particular succeed at a higher percentage than companies that don't really have a strategic plan. We can call it a business plan, but it's a strategic plan for how they're going to capitalize on opportunities before them. I want to, from the point of view of the banker, I'm most concerned with a couple areas. It would be the executive summary, the financial projections. The rest of it, I need to know that you know. And I'm interested in it, but really to get through the process of applying for a loan, you need to really nail at least those two sections. If you could flip the slide. A little bit about the executive summary. Snapshot of your business. I highly recommend personal meetings, whether we do it via Zoom or in person in a normal course. I highly recommend that your investors or your banker visit you at your place of business. I want to see what's there. I want to see the equipment that you're using. I want to see where the funding is going. Is it to hire people? Is it to expand equipment? Is it to change capabilities? What is it? The executive summary, this makes the recommendation that you keep it a page. I don't care if it's 10 pages, as long as it really hits on the strengths, the weaknesses, and the threats and opportunities. It's kind of a SWOT analysis, if you will. If you could flip the slide. I'm very, very interested in goals, your goals and objectives. At the end of every year, if you presented a plan that said, you were going to be 5 million in revenue, but you were 3 million in revenue, are your goals and objectives changed? Do you have the same goals and objectives? We need to be real confident on that, because if you have to make up the difference, there needs to be adjustments to the plan to do so. Also, always very interested in your motivation. Entrepreneurs are more likely, in my experience, to want to build a business in order to sell the business, or in order to go from local to national. The word entrepreneur implies that. So is that your motivation? Otherwise, it is more likely a family or a lifestyle business, which is something altogether different. We want to know who your target market is, and importantly, what your value proposition is. And by value proposition, I strongly suggest it not be low cost out of the gate, unless it's just very, very difficult to succeed profitably when you're going to take a strategy of shocking the market with your low price. I've just seen it too many times not work out well. If you could flip the slide. The last part of the executive summary is to summarize the sources and uses of where your money's coming from and what you need from me, whether I'm an investor or a banker. And typically, we want to see your contribution, whether it's, again, whatever it is. It's very unlikely that other people will invest when you haven't. So it might take you 2 to 3 years to get that seed money, but it's an important piece of the equation. If you could flip the slide, please. The rest of this, we're going to move pretty quickly through. It's information about other sections of a business plan that, if you want this presentation, I'm happy to email it to you. If you could flip the slide. Again, we're just going to zip through most of this. I want to get to want to make some comment about leadership, and this is a good slide to land on. Who introduced us, and I mean all of us, your banker, your attorney, your CPA, at least by way of background of who the people you're involved with are, who is guiding and leading this company. It's very important to us that we understand that you're coming to us at the bank in particular with a system and a network of guidance. So whether they're formal board members or trusted advisors, I want to know who they are. And if you don't have any, we'll make some recommendations. If you could flip to the next slide. Organizational structure. I'll say one thing about this. Keep it really simple. The simpler, the better, especially in the beginning. And the other thing is, from my perspective, when I see an organizational structure that has husband, wife, brother, son, daughter, cousin, all of these family members, I will caution you very openly that is a dangerous way to get going, because the needs of the family will always supersede, in general, the needs of the organization, just because you love those people. But that's all I'll say about that one. It's just something I've noticed, and something we all notice when we walk into a plant or whatever. If your overhead includes supporting lots and lots of relatives, it's generally a drag on cash flow. If you could go on to the next slide. I will leave this to your very important relationship with your attorney and your accountant to decide what form of business. It really doesn't matter to the bank at all. It matters to you, and it matters certainly as you plan for paying taxes. Next slide. I think we went through these. If you go on, maybe this is doubled. Okay, product line or service. We're going to flip through this quickly because, again, I think you've all taken a class in business plan, or writing a business plan. I really wanted to just hit on the importance of the executive summary, and if you could flip forward toward projections. Financial projections. Basically, the bank wants to see, most importantly, probably your profit and loss projections, but we also want to understand your capital structure, which we would find on your balance sheet, and the cash flow. Is this a product cycle that takes 4 or 5 months to return cash, or is it quicker than that? Next slide, please. And incidentally, if you don't know the answer to those questions, that's okay too. Let's sit shoulder to shoulder and figure it out. That's what we're here for. I have tools I can share. And it's really important for you to understand that once you've made a sale, it's going to take 109 days for that sale to turn into cash, by the time you collect the receivable, et cetera. And you need cash. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mary. So we actually are coming up on time here. We did have a question.
Okay.
I needed to have Ashley and John address, or one or the other. Are the slides going to be made available after the presentation? The audience wanted to know, and they wanted to know how to access them. So Ashley or John or Amy, I don't know if you guys have that answer.
It's fine by me to send them out.
So is there a place where we can actually post those? We got our technical team on mute there. Let's see if we can get them off. All right, unfortunately, Mary, I think we lost them.
Oh, that's okay. Well, at the end of this slide, there is, if you can just flip to one of the last pages.
Yep.
There's a website. We have a lot of resources. Bank of America has tremendous resources for you. If you want to call me, if my contact information is somewhere on this presentation, I highly recommend that. I'm happy to talk to anybody. and I think a differentiator in today's marketplace is your access to information. We'll give it to you for free, as much as we have. And that's industry data, et cetera. And I think you need a lot of that if you're just starting out. It's a key differentiator. So with that, I'll stop.
So thanks so much, Mary. I will throw my shameless plugs in here for both Bank of America and for Ben Kern and his team. I've used both of them pretty extensively. They both supported small businesses that I've helped support, and I think that they are amazing assets to the community. So thank you guys both for being panelists, and we're gonna go ahead and wrap up here. It sounds like Ashley probably came back on here. So
Thank you.
all right, thank you guys.
Hey, Eric, we will work on uploading the slides to Socio for viewer access.
Okay, so there's the answer for our audience. They will be uploaded to Socio. Thank you guys so much. Thanks so much, Mary.
Thanks. Bye.
I look forward to seeing you when COVID's over.
You too.
Bye-bye.